One of the groups that we're working with is through the Ontario Federation of Indian Friendship Centres, who's like the umbrella group for friendship centres in Ontario. And they have a project going called Kije Anishinaabe Nin, I'm a Kind Man. It's a poster campaign and a grassroots activism, kind of like white ribbon campaign of men, it's Native men working to end violence against Native women. And they have 100 facilitators trained across Ontario who are doing campaigns in their communities. But what I found really fascinating was I went to the training of some of these facilitators because I was starting to work with them, and they brought in a Lakota man from Pine Ridge to train, and he's a man who's done 30 years of work in ending violence against women, comes out of an experience of himself being a batterer, and so he speaks from that experience. And what he said at the training, which really struck me, and I put it in this paper that Albert is in, is about, he said, you know, when the 7th Cavalry came to our communities in the 1800s, we were appalled at the behavior of those soldiers. He said we couldn't believe that they were swearing and drinking and being violent and abusing our women, and the violence, you know, we couldn't believe that, and it was the gendered violence too. And he said what happened to me was, it was the turning point for me was when I realized that I had become a 7th Cavalry man, and I had to relearn how to become a Lakota man. And that was the beginning of his healing. As a batterer and as an Indigenous man. And so, anyway, I was just like, to me that's profound, you know, when you think about how do we go back and start to learn those things that belong to us. Because what happened, you know, what I think about when I think about those circles and how our men had that sacred duty to protect and provide, and that was shattered and taken away from them because they had to sit there and watch their kids get taken away to residential schools. What does that do to the men? What does it do to them when you take their territory away and they can't hunt and provide for their families? And so we know as women, as Indigenous women, that, you know, we could keep churning along and running the families and doing all those things. But the men, you know, they were seriously, you know, injured through that process. And so how do we find out, you know, how to put that back together? But what I found really fascinating at this gathering of men was that, so this Lakota man was telling that, and then he's going on and he started teaching herstory, right? And he starts talking all about, you know, how Indigenous people, we were all matriarchal, which, you know, I don't know about the term matriarchal, but what he was saying was we were not patriarchal as Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and this is what was introduced. And what was introduced was, in order to colonize us, they had to introduce violence and male dominance, right? Because they couldn't break us down without bringing that in. And Andrea Smith writes about this as well, about how dominance and male violence was really key in terms of colonizing us and breaking us down. Because that's what needed to be introduced to break apart those strong kinship systems, many of which were built around women's networks, right, and women's kin networks. So anyway, he's telling all this and he's saying, yeah, we were all matriarchal, we're not. And all these guys that were in this training were like, yeah, you know, there was like hungry for information about how they could be men, how they could identify themselves as Indigenous men, and masculinities that could be based on something other than, you know, a different type of power, right? What was their power? That was a power that was in balance with the powers that we have as women. And we know, like I've been working on so much around those powers that we have as women and why we have these jurisdictions, and when we're on moon time we don't interfere with men's powers and all that kind of stuff. But what was that on the other side, right? And how do we honor that and allow that to, you know, from wherever we are as moms or as aunties or as research team members or as sisters, support the development of that to move forward. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on right now, me and a whole bunch of other people. So.